What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Ghosts in the Night, a hauntings and paranormal podcast. I am Phil Sams. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to check out this podcast. Today we have a very special guest. I recently had a conversation with Kieran Woodhouse. He's a paranormal investigator out of the UK. He's also a lecturer on the paranormal. He has a new book out, and he also has a podcast that he has called The Paranormal Paradigm. It was a fascinating conversation. We cover a lot of topics on the paranormal, from investigating to even a concept of a holographic world and how we can make our own reality. It's really fascinating. I really enjoyed the conversation. Now, I was sick as a dog for this interview. I had a really bad cold. I was a little stoned on NyQuil probably, so I didn't do the best job. There was a lot of questions I left on the table, and I should have asked him when it comes to his philosophies and his investigating techniques. So I'm definitely going to have him back on again, because I didn't do a very good job, but it's still a fascinating interview. He has some great ideas when it comes to the paranormal field, so it's well worth the listen. So let's go ahead and get the podcast started. Ghost in the Night with Phil Sams. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Ghost in the Night, a hauntings and paranormal podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Kieran Woodhouse. He is a paranormal investigator. He is also an author, lecturer, and now a podcast host as well. Kieran, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Phil. How are you?
Just never better. If I get rid of this cold, I'd be happy. But it's not good for audio when you're all stuffy and clogged up. So I might have to blow my nose, but I'll be sure to cut that out. You recently just released a book. Go ahead and tell everybody about your new book you just released.
Sure. My book's titled An Introduction to Paranormal Investigation, and it's basically for anyone who's looking to start out into the world of investigating the paranormal. Because I kind of got a bit not annoyed, but I began to get a bit irate with people turning up to our investigations and believing everything that they saw on TV and things like that. And it was trying to explain to them that it isn't an hour of constant activity, that investigating is, slightly different to how it's perceived in the entertainment industry. So it details equipment that's used, why we use it, so they have a better understanding of what they're using. And there's some detailed stories in there and experiences that myself and my team have had over the years as well. So it's quite an interesting book. It's my first book, so go easy on me. But yeah, it's good.
Great. When it comes to, there's another topic I want to really dive into, but when it comes to equipment as a paranormal investigator, what do you like to use? Because I'm personally of the mindset I am the best paranormal investigating piece of equipment there is, because I have so many sensors. I trust my experiences more than I trust equipment, because sometimes equipment is designed to look at other things and detect other things that we are interpreting as paranormal, to where when I go to a haunted location, I want to experience it, not just, have a K2 meter go off. I want to use all of it to validate my experiences, but I trust myself more than I trust, say, EMF detector or whatever.
Yeah, I think you've basically answered my question there. It's the best piece of ghost hunting equipment that you can use is yourself, because you don't have faulty batteries, and you can't be affected by kind of other things. Whereas the pieces of equipment that we do use, such as K2 meters and REM pods and things like that, they're all designed for other things. So they're all designed for leaky wiring or faulty microwaves and stuff like that. They're not actually designed with spirits in mind, so they can be affected by mobile phones, by faulty wiring, by things like that. So you're never really truly getting a true reading. However, if you see something, you can trust yourself. You know that maybe you're a bit too tired and you're hallucinating, so not to trust that. But sometimes you'll see something and that was there. I've literally just seen that, and I believe that. That's the best piece of evidence that you can get. If you have a piece of equipment that validates that and backs that up, fantastic. But if you see something and your K2 meter doesn't get affected, that doesn't mean that you didn't see anything. You did see it, and that's what matters.
Right. Yeah. Paranormal investigating is very tricky because we are dealing with stuff we don't fully understand. That's what we do. We try to explain the unexplainable. And I've been thinking really hard here lately about what it is we are interacting with, what it is we are really experiencing. And that is one reason why I wanted to have you on, is because you have a concept or a theory that is fascinating to me, and I've kind of been looking into it. And that is kind of the concept of a holographic world. Maybe our reality isn't exactly what we think it is. Go ahead and kind of dive into that and kind of explain to everybody listening what your version of the holographic world is.
Yeah, well, for me, we kind of create our own universe. So our mind is nothing more than an electrical point of attention that kind of decodes all of the frequency signals that are out there in the world. And if we, see something, all we're doing is our brain is tuning into that frequency, and therefore we're perceiving what we believe that we're seeing. And when you understand that we're seeing roughly 0.05% of the light spectrum, and that's what we call visible light. So outside of that, you have things such as ultraviolet, infrared, microwave, all these other frequencies that we can't perceive with our human eyes and our ears. So that's 99.95% of the world that we know of that we can't see. So that's 99.95% of the room I'm sat in right now I can't see. So that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just means I can't see it. So for me, I use an analogy of a radio station. So you listen to Radio X, it doesn't mean that Radio Y doesn't exist. It's still there, you're just not tuning into it. As soon as you tune into Radio Y, Radio X still exists, you've just changed your frequency dial. So maybe psychics or mediums have the ability to tune into both stations at the same time. Maybe when people see a ghost or a UFO, or even down to cryptids such as Bigfoot and things like that, maybe what they're seeing is there's been a little break in the veil of the matrix, shall we say. And just like when your radio in your car has interference and you pick up two stations at the same time, it could be possible that that's what's happening there. You're picking up on alternate frequencies, and for a brief second you're essentially seeing your frequency, and you're also just seeing outside of the light spectrum, the visible light spectrum as well.
Okay. Now, because I've also been kind of kicking around the idea of parallel universes and parallel, dimensions or timelines or whatever. How does this fit into your theory? Because I've often wondered, when we are out on an investigation and we hear a disembodied voice, we hear a knock, or we see an apparition, is it possible that maybe it's just kind of a vision into a different or a thin spot? When people talk about portals, maybe it's just a thin spot into another dimension? Or do you think this is more about some alien or some higher being is kind of just, we are seeing the world or our world through somebody's looking through the world and through our eyes, essentially, and they're kind of manipulating, or not necessarily manipulating, but kind of, we are like the recorder, the video camera for a higher being.
I believe that we're all existing in the same world. So again, I always use an analogy of a block of flats. So we live on one floor in this frequency, in this 5 sense reality that we're experiencing, and above us you might have aliens, and on the bottom floor you might have ghosts, and that they're there because occasionally you hear them moving the furniture around, or they have the telly on quite loud, and you might pass them very occasionally in the lift, but ultimately you can't interact with them because they're on a different floor to you. And that's how I see it. We're all coexisting in this world. We're just operating on our own frequency levels. So when you talk about disembodied voices, a very interesting occurrence that we had, we were split into two different rooms next to each other, and some of us heard a growl, and it was quite evil. Some people would call it demonic, and it kind of sent shivers through us. And we found out that the team next to us were recording on an EVP session, and at exactly the same time that we heard the growl, the EVP recorder had picked up hello, and it was a very sweet, innocently spoken hello. And I think what happened there was our human ears on the frequency that we pick up had heard a growl, because ultimately that's all that's happening. Now I'm talking to you, I'm literally just barking at you, but the sound waves that are coming across to you, your mind's decoding it and picking it up as words. So I think that's what happened. We picked it up as this growl. The EVP recorder, which can record in levels that our human ears can't, picked up the word hello. So it's very interesting when that happens, because it really does help back up this theory that they are just existing on different frequency levels.
Right. And like you said earlier, that might be what psychic mediums or people who are sensitive empaths, they are able to pick up on. They can tap into that level a little bit easier than, say, the rest of us. And that would explain why some people, you can have a group of people on an investigation and 3 might have an experience or hear that noise, and 3 others might not hear anything or have any experiences whatsoever.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We've had it where 2 people have been stood next to each other, and one person's having an absolutely brilliant experience. They're seeing like a person kind of manifest right in front of them, and the person next to them can't see a thing, can't feel a thing, and what happens there is you have to be careful that they don't call each other liars, because, as we've said before, it's a very personal experience, and it just means that they're tuning into a particular frequency. It also means that they're potentially manifesting that paranormal phenomenon themselves. They're bringing it into their own universe, because we create our own universe, and it could be that they're kind of manifesting it themselves, and the person next to them isn't. And that's why people who are always religious will always see Jesus, or they will always see a religious figure. If you're into Bigfoot, you will always see a Bigfoot. If you're into UFOs, you see UFOs. And I think what we're doing there is we're ultimately seeing the same paranormal phenomena. We're just manifesting it to fit into our own belief system, and which is an interesting concept. If you could think about that, it would mean that everyone is experiencing the same kind of thing. We just call it different things. We call it UFOs, we call it ghosts, we call it religious sightings. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, people always, from all these paranormal reality shows, they always hear about residual hauntings and intelligent hauntings. But there is a third, and that is a manifest haunting. And essentially poltergeist, it's really a poltergeist haunting. When people think of poltergeist as in the movie where, people coming out of the, getting pulled through the television. A poltergeist haunting is when somebody is actually manifesting that activity. It's, generally.
Yeah, it basically just means noisy spirit. It's something that could move things, throws things around. It doesn't necessarily have to be evil,
right,
or demonic. If a spirit can slam drawers in your kitchen, or if a spirit can move a glass of water on your work surface, then that classes as poltergeist activity. So for me, the word poltergeist, it doesn't so much describe a spirit, it just describes a particular activity that can happen.
Right. And with the people actually don't think about being able to actually manifest activity. Their energy, their psychic powers, essentially, for lack of a better term, can cause activity. And that is why I always, when I go into an investigation, I try to keep a clear mind. I don't try to be too high, too low. I try to be, even keeled. I don't go into an investigation looking to find evidence. I go in just with the attitude of what's going to happen. Let's find out, because I'm aware that even I can probably manifest some activity. somehow.
Yeah, I think if it depends on your mindset as well. I think if you go into a paranormal investigation scared, if you go into it convinced that you're going to find something bad, then I believe that you will manifest a bad spirit. I believe that you will have a bad experience, and that can translate into everyday life. If you leave for work in the morning in a bad mood, then everything bad is going to happen to you. If you leave for work in a good mood, then those bad things won't seem that bad, and you'll be okay about it. And I think that's the same in kind of paranormal investigations. If you go in a good mood, in a happy mood, if you're positive about what you're going to experience, I think that you can only experience positive manifestations, and that's what comes across in your evidence.
Right. Yeah, because recently I went on an investigation to a location where I've been to three, I think this is my fourth time. And every time I've been there, things have built. First I've caught a shadow figure on a still photo, which kind of goes along with the reports. The shadow figure was caught where people said they've seen it. We've had lights turn on and off there. Multiple knocks, bangs, disembodied voices. I mean, it is a very active place. This last time I went there, we went on a Saturday. I didn't have a good day beforehand because generally I like to get some rest because as a paranormal investigator, it's a third shift job essentially.
It really is.
So I didn't get my rest beforehand. I didn't get to take a nap. I wasn't in a great mood when I got there. Everything just kind of, I was kind of in that mood where things just, frustrated me. It didn't take much to frustrate me that night.
Yeah.
And I did not get anything. I mean, that place was dead as hell. I didn't get shit. And I left about 3:00 in the morning because, I had some things to do the next day. So I didn't stay all night. But when I left, apparently the other people stayed. They got some activity. So,
wow. Okay.
So it's, I firmly believe that I, wasn't going to get anything. If there was a spirit interacting, he or she wasn't going to, or it wasn't going to interact with me because it kind of looked at me and said, okay, this guy's kind of being a dick or he's not in a good frame of mind. I will wait till he leaves or I will interact with somebody else.
Yeah, I think that goes hand in hand with, the reason why skeptics will never see anything because, although I do approach an investigation with a skeptical cap on, you have to be slightly open-minded, not so open-minded that your brain falls out, but you have to have some kind of open-mindedness. And I know of people that a spirit could literally walk up to them, slap them in the face, speak to them, and they still would find a reason to not believe that had happened.
Right.
And what these skeptics do is they tend to pick on the believers. So at the other end of the spectrum, you have these believers where every single noise is a ghost, every knock that they hear is a ghost. They don't try and explain it. They just believe that it's a ghost. And I think these two different ends of the spectrum are just as bad as each other because, the skeptics that will have a go at these believers don't understand that they're just as bad. They're so far at the other end of the spectrum that they're almost coming full circle and joining with the people that they're, having a go at. So you have to be somewhere in the middle, I believe, when you approach a paranormal investigation. You have to be open-minded, but you also have to, try and explain it away as much as you possibly can. And there will be times where you can't explain what's happened.
Right.
And it's then that you have to kind of admit maybe it was paranormal then.
Right. Now, let me ask you a question. I've interviewed, I've been on investigations with people with psychic mediumship type abilities who they believe they are 100% interacting with ghosts. How does that fit into this concept of a holographic world? Is it just maybe they're just misinterpreting what they're getting? Or
well, I think that they basically have like access to a digital radio. So, I don't know if you have it in America, but we have things, digital radio, so we can listen to things that the radio in my car can't listen to.
Okay.
And I think they basically just have this ability that where they can transcend frequencies, they can go higher, they can go lower, and they can talk to these spirits. I think some of them, I'm not sure, there are some mediums who are in what I called earlier the entertainment industry.
Right.
And when they follow that avenue, because I believe what's happened with the paranormal industry over the past decade or so is we've forged two paths now, and you've got the entertainment industry and you've got the research industry, and I tend to follow the research industry, and I think that you have some mediums that have gone down both paths. And I do think that they are seeing these spirits. Right. I just think they have the ability to, as I mentioned earlier, to tune into whatever radio station they want and listen to that particular song, and that's the messages that they're pulling through.
Right. The only thing with people with those special gifts, sometimes it does irk me a little bit, because they're sitting there saying, I'm talking to the ghost of Mary, she lived from this time to this time. I'm like, okay, maybe I don't doubt you're getting something. You are getting some kind of input coming into your brain that I'm not getting. But how are you 100% sure that is what, how do they, interpreting it is where the tricky part is.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a skill. I mean, I know a friend of mine that has medium abilities. He's very good. He's told me things that I'm sure he wouldn't have known.
Right.
And he told me a very interesting story about how he was talking to a guy who he didn't really know. I think he'd met him at work, and they were having a conversation, and he kept seeing this little boy about 4 years old running around them. And he knew that this boy was spirit, he knew that he wasn't a physical body. And this boy came up to him and he opened both of his hands. And in one hand, he had a coin, and in the other hand, he had a rainbow projecting out of his hand. And, eventually he kind of got the courage to say to this guy, that there's a little boy running around, and he showed me a coin and a rainbow. And after about 30 seconds of, being in shock, this bloke admitted that his child had died when he was about 4 years old. And when he was lying in his coffin, he had given him his army medal. And of course, an army medal is something that looks like a coin, and the coloured strips on the tag look like a rainbow. So a child of 4 years old wouldn't know what an army medal is. To a child, it looks like a coin, right, and it looks like a rainbow. And that's what he showed to this medium. And the medium had to take that and try and, analyze it to say, well, what is it you're actually trying to tell me? And luckily for him, the guy he was talking to helped him analyze it, and they realized what it was. But I think you're right. I think some mediums will, if they're only doing it on themselves, they will analyze certain information wrong. And therefore, what we're taking as gospel, when they tell us certain things, it might not be true, because they might be misanalyzing it. They might not be fully understanding the message that they're being given. And I think it's a true skill of a medium to be able to analyze it and give correct information.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't doubt they're getting something, but from my experience, it almost seems like, when you go into a location, you have to keep that open mind. Sometimes they don't keep that open mind, and I firmly believe people can actually affect other people's investigations. That's why I don't like to go on investigations with multiple, a big group of people, because I believe it's all energy, and everybody's energy can affect that, what you experience.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we're all pouring energy into the investigation all the time, and that's what the spirits thrive on. They thrive on our energy. And as we say, if you go in with negative energy, it can affect the whole group. Like you said, you went there, you had this bad day, you weren't feeling great, and therefore the whole group suffered, and the whole group didn't begin to experience stuff until you left. And it's having that understanding that if you go as a group, you have to all be on the same wavelength, so to speak, and then you all have to be trying to, aiming for the same goal. Otherwise, it can affect the evidence that you get.
Right. So how many, I'm assuming you have a group or a team. How often do you go out and investigate, and how do you try to prove these theories that you come up with?
I am part of a team, and we don't go out as often as I'd like to. So what I've started to do is I've started to pick local locations to myself that are free. People that want me to go and investigate. So, for example, you said you've done this location 4 times.
Right.
We've got a local pub that's close to me, and we've done that 3 times now, and we're doing it again next Friday. So that's That's something that it's almost like a case study that we're building by keep going back, and we are getting more and more stuff. So at the moment, I'm probably averaging 1 to 2 a month. And that's great. I mean, that's really good. There are times where you do feel a bit run down, as you know yourself. You don't get a lot of sleep, as you say. It's a third shift, and you do need a couple of weeks off every now and then. But when we go, we do research on the location. We make sure that we're taking the right equipment for that location. Anyone that wants to come with us is more than welcome to come with us. And we just have fun, and we try and get as much information and as much data as we possibly can.
Right. Now, do you try to innovate or push the boundaries of experimenting to try to document?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest bugbears with paranormal investigation field at the moment is we've become rather stale. And we're still using the same equipment that we've been using for years. As I mentioned earlier, we use pieces of equipment that don't necessarily have any scientific proof that it relates to the spirit world. So I'm beginning to use experiments that fit in with my theory to try and back up my theory. And it's not a case of I've come up with a theory, therefore I'm going to make it work. It's a case of I've had experiences that have made me kind of develop this theory, and now I want to develop it more. So we had an experiment where we had 2 EMF emitters, and we essentially flooded the room with electromagnetic fields and frequencies, and we had a radio scanner which allowed us to scan through these frequencies to see if we were picking anything up on these frequencies. And what we had was we had an EMF, we had a REM pod in the room, and for the 10 or 15 minutes that we were doing this, we didn't get a single thing on the EMF meter, and we didn't get a single thing on the REM pod. We also didn't get anything on the radio scanner. So after about 15 minutes, I thought, let's go the opposite way. Let's empty the room of all the EMF and see if we get anything. So I turned off the EMF emitters, and within about 10 seconds of technically emptying the room, we had activity straight away on both pieces of equipment. The lights flew up to red on the EMF meter, and we began to get activity. We had knocks, we had what sounded like footsteps on the floorboards, and I believe what we'd done is we'd blocked this spirit communicating with us because he couldn't operate on any of the frequencies that we were filling the room with. And just like if you're at a house party, you go to the kitchen's full of people, you think, oh, I'll come back later. And I think that's what's happened. He came to the door, he's looked in, he's like, I can't get in there, there's no way I can operate in there. So he's left. As soon as we've emptied the room, he thinks, oh, I can get in now. So he comes in and he starts to operate with us, he starts to communicate with us, and we begin to hear things. And I think that, again, it's that kind of research and that kind of experiment that we need to start doing. We need to start using things that operate outside of our own visual and audible fields in order to try and communicate with these things. So that's the way I'm going at the moment.
Okay. Anything you can do to you have to expand this field. Like you said, it is getting a little stale. We've all been using the same equipment essentially since the mid 2000s. And, I remember when the K2 first came about, but that is kind of the problem. A lot of, like we talked about the paranormal reality shows, they're kind of driving the train. If you notice,
absolutely,
all the equipment is based on what they're doing. And it's kind of, that's entertainment. That's not paranormal investigating. It's entertainment disguised as paranormal investigating.
Yeah, it is. It's, without getting too controversial, at the end of the day, these people, they need to rely on entertaining you, because if you're not entertained, you don't watch the programs, right. And if you don't watch the programs, they don't make a living. So that's what I really wanted to set out to do when I started lecturing and writing this book, is to get people to understand that you don't come on a paranormal investigation and have back-to-back activity. You watch things like Most Haunted and stuff, and you get the feeling that, wow, they've literally just turned the lights off and they're getting rocks thrown at them and stuff like that. But you need to understand that these people, they're there for 6 or 7 hours at a time, and they have to condense all of their activity into a 45-minute program. So, I'm not saying that they fake everything. I'm saying that you condense all that activity down into 45 minutes. And even then, most of the program is talking and, walking around the location, not actually doing paranormal investigation. So you probably get about 20 minutes of paranormal investigation from an 8-hour, 6, 7, 8-hour investigation. So people would come along to our investigations, and after half hour, you could see them getting fidgety, they were getting bored, their attention span wasn't there because they were expecting what they were seeing on TV. And then the other aspect is, again, if they have a quiet investigation, then I believe that they're then forced to try a bit of trickery, to try a bit of fakery, because, again, like I've said, they have to keep you entertained. And if they don't, then they don't have a job and they can't make a living. So you need to try and remember this when you watch these programs, that when it tells you at the start, this is for entertainment purposes only, they mean what they say.
Right, exactly. Their first priority is to get people to watch the show so they can get advertisers. It's not necessarily to prove the existence of any kind of paranormal activity. It's to actually get viewership so they make money, their advertisers make money, and that's the name of the game. And I don't fault them for that. I mean, No. I mean, they brought, and one thing I will say, I'm old enough to remember when, I'm 46 years old. I remember when it was taboo to talk about the paranormal. You did. I've had experiences all my life, lived in multiple houses that had activity, and you didn't talk about it outside the kitchen table. And there were some families you didn't even talk about it then. Yeah. To where, back in 2004, 2005, when ghost hunters kind of came about, is really when it became mainstream. And so I can't blame them. I can say they have pushed it into the forefront and into the limelight and opened it up for more people to share their experiences.
Yeah, I think that the problem is, as you say, that their first and primary objective is to make money. And as soon as that happens, for me, their reliability goes out the window, because that now their interest isn't about finding ghosts. Their interest is about making money, and they will do anything they can in order to do that. And unfortunately, that transcends into groups. So the amateur groups that we have dominating the UK market now, there's maybe 3 or 4 big groups, national franchises that are dominating the market, and they're the same. It's all about the money. They have resident mediums with them on nights that will guide you around the night, tell you what to feel, tell you what to see. And it's all about ensuring that you've paid a lot of money and you're happy with what you've paid for, and that you're going to go back again. And people that go on these investigations with these groups, they need to have that at the forefront of their minds, when they're experiencing things and when they're seeing things. They need to remember this.
Right. And people need to realize, I don't look at an investigation where nothing happens as a failure.
It's a true reflection of what happens.
Exactly. And it is put you with every piece of evidence or every experience you debunk, put you one step closer to finding the piece of evidence that is truly paranormal and truly can't be explained. It's kind of backwards from what society thinks it is.
Yeah. I mean, for me, you 99.9% of your investigations is you trying not to fall asleep, and and that's really what happens. But the 0.1% of the time where you hear a footstep or you catch a shadow on camera, that's what keeps you coming back for more. And you think, I want to get 2 shadows, or I want to get more footsteps, and that's what drives you. And we have people come with us, and we try to do a spirit board, and nothing happens. And I always say to them, well, at least we're not faking it. I could easily push the glass around the board and have you believing anything that I wanted you to believe. But I'd rather nothing happen and them understand, that's what paranormal investigating is.
Exactly. I mean, that is the hardest thing to get across to people is, it's not exciting. There's no money in it. So, we do this because we enjoy it. There is a little bit of an adrenaline pump when you're,
there is, absolutely,
when you're sitting in a dark room by yourself, talking to yourself essentially, asking questions, there's a little bit of an adrenaline rush because you don't know what's going to happen. At any moment, something could come touch your shoulder. So we all are a little bit of adrenaline junkies, but I'm okay with, I come from the debunk first mentality. If I hear that noise, I'm trying to debunk it first. And if I can't debunk, if I can't debunk it, then okay, we got something going on here. But it doesn't mean, it's paranormal yet. But people just need to understand that. And if everybody kind of looked at it that way and enjoyed that kind of investigating and didn't pay so much attention or expect the reality shows type experience, it would be much more enjoyable for me anyway, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that paranormal investigating is fun enough as it is without the need to fake things. If you're with the right team, you have a good laugh. I went on an investigation last night. It wasn't the most active, but we had a great time. And if you have guests with you, you meet like-minded people, you make new friends, and it's a great social time. And it's a cheap night out as well if you can get the right location. It's cheaper than going out and spending £100 on drinks and stuff like that. So it's fun enough as it is without the need to manufacture evidence.
So what do you have coming up? I mean, I know you just released the book. Do you have plans on writing another book? What do you have? Any speaking?
Yeah, so I've got some speaking things coming up. I'm not sure on the dates. If people go onto Facebook and follow Paranormal Paradigm podcast, then they'll kind of keep up to date with my podcasts and my lecture events around the UK. I know I'm talking in Bristol, Swindon, and I think Leicester and Swansea in Wales. So and that's all over the next couple of months. Book-wise, I want to push this book a little bit more before I think about the next one. I think the next one's going to be more about the experiences of an investigator. So I almost want it to be like a little series, So if someone's picked up my first book and that now they're just getting into the paranormal investigative world, I want them to grow with me, and I want them to, then pick up the next book and read about experiences that they might have had while they've started out. So I almost want to take them on a journey with my book. So there is plans to write another one, but not in the short term.
Now, the podcast, how often is it? A weekly I think it's a weekly podcast, correct?
It's every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks.
We've got one drop in tomorrow, so it's every second Monday. Basically, we try to drop because there's myself and my co-host. He's got a child, I've got one on the way, and it's kind of, we've got jobs and you have to work around it, don't you? As you know yourself. So we wanted to do it enough that the listeners were entertained and they were getting their fix. But at the same time, we needed to give ourselves our own space as well.
Right, because podcast can be a full-time job sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, some people do it for a full-time job.
Yeah, and I'm actually shocked no kids have come knocking at my door yet. It's actually been quiet. I'm shocked. And no dogs have barked or anything.
No, it's been quite good.
It's been actually a miracle. Because literally, when I hit the call button to call you, I was kicking them out of the room. So I was almost sure there was going to be somebody bouncing up the stairs. Well, so your new podcast drops tomorrow. Everybody be sure to check that out. That is the Paranormal Paradigm podcast, correct?
That's it, yeah. Paranormal. It's a bit of a mouthful. Yeah. But that's why we chose it. It kind of sticks in your mind once you get it. Now, so the Paranormal Paradigm podcast. Now,
your co-host, is he a member of your team or just?
Yeah, so my co-host is a guy called Ben Kelly, and he's a paranormal investigator with myself, so he's part of my team, and I've been in bands with him for years. I've known him for years. So we have that kind of chemistry, I guess. People have commented that they can tell that we're really good friends, and I think that helps with a podcast. If you're hosting it with someone, that you need to be able to bounce off each other and come across that you get on with each other. So it is good chemistry that we've got going on.
Cool. And where can everybody find your book?
My book is available on Amazon, so you can get it on ebook or you can get the paperback. It is on ebook on other stores such as Barnes and Noble or all these kind of ebook stores that you can get access to. If anybody wants a signed copy, please feel free to email me. So you can contact me via the Paranormal Paradigm page, or you can email me at kieran.woodhouse@gmail.com, and I'd be more than happy to post you out a copy myself if you just let me know where you want it to go.
Very cool. I will be sure to put that in all the show notes. That way, they put links to that. That way, if they want that signed copy, they can contact you and get that. So, where's the next place you're going to investigate before we get out of here?
The next place is, again, we're going back to this pub on Friday, so in about 5 days' time. And we've done 3 there now, and it's, as you had with that location that you've been building on, we've had more and more activity every time we've gone. We've had different activity that we haven't had before, and there's a proper little case study being built at the moment. We're finding out things that relate to how the building was before, and when you do a bit of research, you find out that it's true. We've even spoken to customers that have died recently, and they're still in the pub, communicating with us on the spirit box and the spirit board. So it's a proper little, it's a great little location, and so lucky to have it on our doorstep, really. Great.
Well, best of luck on that investigation. I hope you get tons of evidence, and we can answer some of these questions. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and I look forward to following your podcast more, and hopefully have you back on when you come across something big.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. Thank you very much, Phil.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right, that was my conversation with Kieran. A holographic world is something that I have been thinking about, or not necessarily a holographic world, but the fact that, things aren't what they seem. Our reality is what we think is our reality, could be something different. So, and how does that relate to the paranormal? I think he really did a great job at talking about it and explaining it. I'm hoping to dive a little bit deeper into this topic, especially stuff like that we talked about, the how the manifest type hauntings, and going a little deeper into that in upcoming episodes. But I really hope I can get him back on again to kind of go over some things again. So if you haven't checked out his book or read his book, be sure to check it out. You can get it on Amazon. I'll put links to everything, all of his links, whether it be his book, his Facebook page, his email address. I'll put all that stuff in the show notes or in the description if you're watching on YouTube. But definitely give him a listen on his podcast. I've listened to it. Really good. He has a co-host, like he said. It's fascinating. He does a wide range of paranormal topics. But definitely check out the book, give it a read, and let him know what you think. And follow him on Facebook as well. So that's going to wrap up this episode. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at @night_ghost, and let me know what you think of the podcast. Leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, however you watch this podcast. Be sure to leave us a review, give us a rating if you can, and also subscribe, however you take the podcast in. And if you watch the videos via YouTube, be sure to hit the subscribe button there as well, and leave comments. I try to respond to all the comments. If you have a question or you have a story, you can contact me at gitnpodcast@gmail.com. That is the best way to relate your story, a question, or what have you. I return all my emails, or just send me a direct message on Twitter. Those are the 2 best ways to get a hold of me and reach out. Let me know what you think. So, till next week, take care, everybody.